Hello everyone, welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3, and in this lesson we're going to go back and talk about relative loudness once again. I watched the last video I did and realized that maybe it wasn't 100% clear, so I'm going to try to go over it one more time, and I'm going to give you guys some more visual feedback you can look at. This topic is very important, and it's kind of the hot topic right now in music that's being produced because for the most part, music is being produced like this. So not a whole lot of dynamic range. And by dynamic range, I'm referring to the difference between the loudest peaks and the lowest troughs. In this track, it's kind of hard to find the lowest point, maybe somewhere here in the introduction. But really, this second track here, which is a pop track, is what we would refer to as being squashed, meaning that there's not a whole lot of dynamic range. And I'm going to talk about the reasons for that in a little bit. This first track here is a piece of concert music, a romantic piece of music. And in this track, you're going to see a little bit of a wider dynamic range. So from the highest peak to the lowest trough, where there may be no sound at all. Of course, in orchestral music, silence can oftentimes be the composer's best friend, right? So let's quickly just look at what tracks we may or may not be listening to. Again, I'm not actually going to be able to play the audio from these tracks when we're analyzing them, just to be safe, because I don't want to deal with the copyright infringement stuff on YouTube and then try to protest it. Oftentimes it takes quite a bit of time to finally get your point across, because I think they just use algorithms that immediately assume that you're infringing on copyrights when you might be just trying to make a video for educational purposes. But I'll leave it at that for now. So I'm going to put links to a couple of tracks which may or may not be the tracks we are using in this particular example. This first track here, Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. And the second track here, Katy Perry, Dark Horse. Again, we may or may not be using those tracks, but mostly the may, and I will be linking to those in the description. And one little thing I would recommend you guys do, I tried to give you this listening experiment before, I'm going to give it to you again in maybe a slightly different way. Listen to those two tracks back to back and listen to them very quietly first, and then turn the volume up very loud, and just kind of think in your head if you can notice any differences to how that's sounding and how frequently you may want to change the relative volume level in YouTube. The other point I want to mention is that these files here are of CD quality, so they are lossless files. So they're converted to as best as is humanly possible in the realm of digital audio. But what I want to show you guys is the meters on these tracks, and also the frequency spectrum as well. Don't worry too much about the plugin that I'm going to be using. We're going to go over actually how to get this plugin and how to bring it into the Bitwig Studio in a later video, actually quite soon. But for now, what I want you guys to be focusing on especially are some of these numbers down here. I'll explain to you what they mean when I go through and play the tracks, but you can watch this meter up here, the RMS value, the max crest factor, and also this clippings value, as well as the peak number. I'd say really focus on the peak, the RMS, and this here, the meter. And these are all going to be statistics that are letting you know about the relative loudness of the track. So I'm just going to click play here, and we're going to watch and see. Actually, let's actually mute both tracks here to get a better representation of this. So we're right now playing through the first track, which is the I'm afraid to say the actual name, which is the orchestral piece of music. And let's just watch some of these values here. Okay, the RMS value is basically indicating to you the average level in decibels. So minus 43 is a very, very low number. Also, your peak number here down at -23, that's a very low number. You can see the meter here bouncing up and down, which is letting you see that there is a bit of a wider dynamic range in this track. I can go ahead to a point that's a little bit louder, so you'll just have to assume that the meter is going on as it is. So let's play from this point and just watch these meters here as we're getting to the loudest point in the track. Keep an eye on the peak there and keep an eye on this clippings value in the RMS. Very large number for the RMS. Something you would never see with a pop track. All right, and let's maybe just go a little bit closer to the end. We're getting out of that loud section in the track. And obviously, when you pause a track and then you go somewhere else in it, it is going to throw off these RMS values and the max crest factor a little bit. This isn't something that you guys need to worry about too much, but it's similar to the RMS. It's similar to sort of the average level of the signal over time. All right, very cool. Let's go ahead and stop this now. And now we're going to take a look at the second track, and you guys are going to see a huge difference. All right, here we go. Let's open up the metering tool again. Click play. And watch these values. And watch how quick the RMS is going to rise. So where we were in the -30s for the RMS in the last track, we're already up to -16, -15. You can take a look at these peak numbers here at 0.1. Okay, so that's basically as loud as you can possibly get without going into distortion. And we'll talk more about that later as well. This clippings value here, if you guys remember from that orchestral piece of music, there were 0 clippings, and this track already is basically this is telling you that it's been peaking out around the 0.1 or up into the 0 dB range. Bitwig actually has more sensitive meters. I'm going to show you this real quick. This is a pretty cool thing to see. Hopefully the song doesn't come through too loudly on the microphone, but I'm going to risk it nonetheless and unmute track 2 so you can watch these meters going crazy. Track is so loud that you're probably hearing it through my headphones, which are on the table beside me here. But you can see the meters in Bitwig here that when they're bouncing in red, that means that you're going over. Obviously, these meters are more sensitive than what's actually happening because this track isn't distorting at all. I can guarantee you that they're incredibly professional when working with a pop track like this. And so you can guarantee that it's not actually distorting. It's just that these meters are a little bit more sensitive. So if you've been watching this RMS number, 9.8 dBs, that's very little dynamic range for the track. And you've obviously been watching these peak values and seeing the meters. And you could even have compared the frequency spectrum content, but we're not going to worry about that too much for now. So let's go ahead and stop this. And then we will just kind of wrap up what I've been trying to explain here. So in essence, what's going on is that this second track, this pop track, has very small dynamic range, and therefore people refer to that as being louder. Perceptually, if you have a track that has a very small and narrow dynamic range and you boost it up to try to get it as loud as possible without clipping or going over, without crossing that 0 decibel threshold, then your track is going to sound louder to the listener. Compare that to this track here, this orchestral track, where there's such a huge dynamic range that if you were to listen to this on the radio followed by this on the radio, you're definitely going to feel like this track is a lot quieter, doesn't have as much power, and therefore you're going to be more likely to flip the station. And that's the essence of pop music and how these tracks are processed in the post-production realm. The goal of a lot of pop music today is to be as loud and as strong as possible from start to finish. And this track really shows that. You can see it with the way the waveform works, the contours, the very slight contours from start to finish. And even here at the very end, you'll notice how loud this is, right? We're about as loud as you can possibly get. And there's a reason for that. And if you think about it for a second, you'll understand is if you end a track on a really loud note like this, the loudest part of the entire piece of music, people are going to want to listen to it again. People are going to remember it. This is how these tracks can sustain such long airplay on the radio. If you make a track and you're flipping through the radio and you hear something quiet, 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 and then boom, you get something really loud that's right in your face, you're going to stay on that station for longer. I don't know why human beings like stuff louder, but we tend to like things loud and in our face, and this track shows that very well. Also, think about the radio and where you listen to it most often. Nowadays, you're listening to it in your car. So if someone is making a track for the radio and they know you're probably going to be listening to it in the car, they're going to make that track with that in mind. And so they're going to make sure that they make that track very loud. So even if you have the windows down and your radio is not up too loud, you're still going to hear everything that's going on. And if you did that experiment, like I told you to do, to turn the volume down way low and to listen to these two tracks back to back, what I hope you noticed is that when you're listening to this orchestral piece of music, you're going to struggle for a lot of it to even hear what's going on at all. You're going to have to really strain and really focus to pick up on some of the subtle nuances in the track. As it gets louder, you're really going to notice and be able to pick up on more things that go on. With this track here, this pop track, when you listen to it at a very low level, you're going to be able to hear all of the lyrics. You're going to even be able to hear a lot of the main hooky type parts of the track. So the things that are going to stick in your mind, that main melody, that that's going to stick with you. And also that low bass line, if you have the capability to hear that with the system that you were listening to this track back on. So to recap one more time, dynamic range is the difference between the loudest peak and the lowest track and the lowest trough in any given audio file. And the louder, the smaller that dynamic range, the more squashed that track may be, perceptually it's going to sound louder to you. There's nothing right or wrong with either approach, and it makes sense why the tracks are as they are. Because when you have something like concert music, and when you look at the markings on a traditional score, there's so many markings for dynamics with crescendos and, play this loud or play this soft. Some composers are a little more finicky about it than others. Whereas with something that's a popular music track, dynamics has kind of gone out the window, really. It's just part of our evolution in the fact that we have different tools we can draw on with our music, where early on, when you don't have a whole lot of instruments to choose from, dynamics can be very important. Where now, where we have so many different aspects and tools at our disposal, unfortunately, I would say dynamics has kind of taken a back seat to some of those other aspects of music. All right, thank you guys for listening and watching this video. And like always, feel free to leave any comments or questions about what was going on, and I'll be sure to get back to you. So stay tuned for the next lesson.